Welcome to the Wholesome Healing Collective.
Join us on our podcast for a journey into the hearts of healers from all walks of life, diving deep as we explore meaningful conversations that have the power to inspire, empower, and share life-changing wisdom.
Through this community, we hope to create a welcoming environment where our listeners leave feeling nurtured and uplifted. We are so delighted you are here. My name is Alyssa.
And I'm Renee. Grab a drink, get cozy, and let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wholesome Healing Collective. We have an incredible guest with us here today. Her name is Suzanne Anderson. She is the founder of the Mysterial Woman, psychologist, author, coach, leadership consultant, and transformational teacher. Her pioneering work in guiding others to awaken their full feminine and masculine strengths combines insights and practices from ancient wisdom, depth psychology, and modern neuroscience. She recently published her new book, You Make Your Path by Walking, a transformational field guide through trauma and loss, which we're looking forward to hearing more about in today's episode. Welcome, Suzanne. We're thrilled to have you.
No, thank you. Great to be here with you both.
We would love to kick it off by asking our signature question, which is, what is your favorite self-care practice?
Well, I have many, and I'm sure in the course of our conversation, I'm going to talk about some, but my favorite I'm doing right now is tea. I am a drinker. I am a tea kind of, I make my own tea and the ritual of tea itself. But the one I'm going to talk about is the way I pair tea and napping. So I am an afternoon, I've done this for decades, actually. And it's when I had a corporate job, even, it was like, I knew I needed about 20 minutes in the afternoon to just be quiet. I take in a lot of energy. I'm a very sensitive being. And whether I'm in person or on Zoom or just here working, and I have a ritual where I go, it's usually between 2 and 3. I never book clients or classes or anything, but basically between 2 and 3. And so somewhere in there, I will have a nap, and I do it with my kitty. I have 2 cats. This is the girl cat, Leela, loves to nap with me, and she will actually come and find me if I don't come to her. So she loves it too. It's like a limbic thing for her. And she curls up in my belly, and I tune in. I call it yin nectar. It's like yin nectar. I just drop out for 20 minutes. It's like a refresh or a reboot of the computer. And then when that's done, I make a cup of tea, and I hold it, and it's warm, and I take the time to be with my tea. So that's the one I'm going to share with you to start with.
That is beautiful. Yin nectar. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And how co-nourishing to couple it with a furry friend to cuddle up with.
Yes. And I think the tea is, because I'm so specific, I blend a black and a green tea, actually a couple of different black teas and a green tea. And I make this really delicious blend. And I feel I know exactly what I'm drinking, and then the hot water. And I am one of the things in my second book, especially, but that I teach in the work that I do, is the potency of ritual and how ritual speaks to the right brain, the left brain, to the conscious, the unconscious, in a way that unfortunately we've lost a lot of in our modern culture. And so the ritual of tea, it isn't just like I'm getting myself a cup of tea and throwing a tea bag in the tea. This is loose leaf tea. It's made specially. It's steeping in the pot. It's in a special pot. It's in a special mug, all of that.
Yeah. Ooh, that might be a beautiful segue to, I would love to hear your thoughts on sharing the difference between a healthy habit that we might just go through the motions of on a daily basis versus that more ritualistic, intentional practice and the different nuances between those.
What do you mean by a healthy habit? Can you give me an example of what you would?
So maybe one might say that drinking tea is a healthy habit, and we could just get up and make the cup of tea and drink it without thinking about it. And it would still be beneficial for the body because of those elements or nutrients in it.
Yeah.
But how much more special is it and nurturing in different ways when we add that ritualistic practice with intention?
Yeah, totally. Okay, that's a great question. And it has everything to do with the shift from ordinary mind to sort of, you could say, the mind of wonder, or the mind of that's beyond the logical or the mechanistic. I have to get this thing and fulfill this task. And the beauty of ritual, and one of the reasons I I teach it, I feel it's a lost language, is that we are, one of the models that we use in psychology often for speaking about the psyche is the iceberg model. You've probably seen. So 2/3 of the iceberg is underwater, which is the unconscious, actually the embodied. You're both body practitioners, so you know how important that is. And just 1/3 on the top is the conscious mind, who I think I am. But the whole direction of the iceberg is driven by what's under the water. And ritual speaks to both parts. Rituals takes you in, so it's about where I direct my attention, and energy follows attention. So the moment my attention, is present for this to be something special or not just a task I'm doing, I gather a certain amount of energy, and that energy is then present and available in that experience, which is quite different. Yeah.
Mm. And do you feel like with the tea, because you're putting energy into something that you're consuming, that it creates kind of a circular motion of energy going out and coming back in?
I think it does. Yeah, I think it does. And it is, we could say this for a lot of different rituals, whether because we can't go through our whole day. We do need our ordinary mind, and there are times when we just need to brush our teeth, or we just need to do the habit that we do every day. But again, I'll just say the quality of attention you bring, and this is a very simple ritual, tea drinking, but there are other rituals that I write about in the second book, where when you are going through a difficult time, the simple ritual, I'll give you an example of one that was really important for me. And again, it was just a way of directing my attention. So the first book and the work that I do is around, and I've dedicated years to researching and understanding what it means for women to develop to the next level of their consciousness. And that was a specific interest of mine, having been a consultant working with men and women, but really noticing something is not happening here with women. Like we'd become one of the boys and had lost something important, and I didn't know what that was. So that was a process of research for me for many years, and in our university women's programs, leadership programs. And then at the end of that, we figured some things out. We actually started to understand what it meant for women right at this time on planet from an evolutionary perspective to really wake up. Almost, I think of it almost like a new human species coming in, which is why I came up with the word mysterial to describe this kind of way of being that we hadn't seen emerging, where women were really bringing together their feminine and masculine strengths, which means, of course, they had to cultivate them. And just as that book was getting ready to come out, I had what I would call the picture perfect life, living with my beloved husband and our amazing property and sort of estate, all that we tended there. And I came home one day in early January 2013 and found him dead, and found him dead by his own choice, in the sense that he died by suicide. So just that we, and your listeners can sort of feel here the dynamic here of, I'm ready to launch into the world with this new book. I spent a year writing with my co-author, and run a new program that I hadn't run for a while we were writing. And there were many things that were about to launch. It was really a time I imagined of flight. And instead, it was like life saying, let's not so fast. You're going to go down now. And maybe we could even say, let's see if you can really fully live everything you've taught, and that I had embodied, obviously, at some level, in the most difficult circumstances possible. That's been the journey of the last 10 years that ended up in this book, which we'll talk more about. But the very beginning, and of course, I knew a lot about ritual. I knew I treat and really work with trauma. That is the work we do. Working with the developmental traumas that women have experienced that have stopped them from being more whole. And of course, when something like that happens, you're not using your theory. In fact, your prefrontal lobe in trauma is pretty much offline. But the thing I knew to do, and this was the ritual I wanted to speak to, was what was a very simple thing. First thing in the morning, because I would come out of the unconscious, and anyone who's gone through, profound loss knows what that is, the darkness that envelops you in the unconscious, or the other world that you're in that maybe is wonderful, and then you reemerge out of the dreamscape, and you're in this nightmare, which is even, is just unbelievable. You can't believe you're there, and you don't want to believe you're there. And I would just require myself this one thing, to sit up on the side of my bed. And I did a little prayer, which was to say, put my feet on the ground, to sit on the side of the bed and say, I am grateful to be here, to be in this body. David is not here, not in a body. He cannot do this. And may everything I do today be a blessing. May it allow my path to unfold before me. I would say things roughly in that zone. And most of the time at the beginning, I didn't really believe it. It was just and I say this to the listeners, it's a ritual to direct my ordinary mind. So my ordinary mind would have resisted what was happening, and I needed to be in the present as much as I could be. Or, would be pull the covers back over my head and never move. And that got me moving. And then, the day would unfold. So that was the story I wanted to tell that was connected to the tea. But simple rituals like that can be profound. And it was a ritual. It still is. I still do some version of that.
Oh, that is such a powerful ritual and such an amazing story. And you've been through so much in the last 10 years. And it's so interesting how the universe ripped that rug right out from underneath you and showed you something different.
Yeah. I sometimes call it the dark wake up, the she force, the dark she force. I had an awakening in Bali that I would say was the light she force, this beautiful experience of bliss and union with everything that really set me on the path to do the work I was doing with women. And then this was the work I do is about the integration of the yin and the yang. So, yeah, So that was the if I think about it, and I do, and I wrote about it, that this was my initiation, profound initiation. And we are, and I believe, in very big initiatory times as a planet. Things are changing. We are not going to go back. We cannot go back to pre-COVID, falling asleep again to many things. And we have a global climate crisis that isn't just affecting one little part of the world. Where this morning I was reading, all the forest fires in Canada. I'm Canadian, so I somehow I noticed myself reading this and feeling sort of responsible. It's ridiculous, but obviously I still identify as a Canadian. And all of that smoke going, massive issue on the East Coast of the United States. And even in Europe, like whatever way we think that we're just isolated and it's just us, it's not true. So we are in these times, but we don't live them. We don't have initiations in our culture. We don't, and this is the point of this book, is to say, if you get called by life, either you could say just the crisis, the trauma on the planet, or in your own personal life where there is a loss, and not necessarily as like a suicide. It could be a loss of a partner. It could be the loss of a relationship. It could be loss of a certain phase of your life, of health, of a child leaves home and goes off to do their own thing. There are all these really important transitions in our lives where the old actually needs to be released, and we don't know how to be in those times, those initiations. And that's again where ritual can be really, really powerful.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm feeling called to ask about, and you already kind of started talking about this with that morning ritual, but that resistance that we often run up against when change happens in our lives, especially if it's perceived as a negative change or a loss, and just how we can move with it instead of against it, and allow that energy to be processed so that it's not just stored in the recesses of our body for a later date and time when we're ready to deal with it. I know that there's probably listeners out there that may have just encountered a situation that they need to move through, or perhaps it's something from the past that's been stored and we know that we need to move through it and look at it, and maybe we don't know how. And so I'd love to hear you talk a little more about that, just moving with it instead of against it when those things happen.
Right. Well, first, let's normalize for everyone that resistance is essential, and it's part of the process of transformation or change. And if we didn't have that resistance, well, it's the way basically that the unconscious parts of ourselves, that, and what we call the unconscious is anything the conscious mind doesn't want to have a relationship with. It's the way that we keep that barrier strong between the conscious and the unconscious. And we want that, actually. We don't want the unconscious erupting all the time. So it isn't that resistance. So that's one of the important things. And in our work and in our programs, we really anticipated if anybody's going through a serious change, there will be resistance.
Yeah.
So then it is, how can we befriend the resistance and not be the resistance? So in other words, recognizing that part that is resisting and being able to turn toward it, not away from it. So in a big loss, or some kind of change that's significant, as I mentioned, the prefrontal cortex kind of goes offline, and And that helps in denial, which is actually valuable. You want denial at the beginning, because trauma happens when the nervous system basically can't handle whatever has come toward it. And it gets overwhelmed. And when we get overwhelmed, we find a strategy. We could say the ones we know: fight, flight, freeze, or fawning, where we take that experience and do something with it because we cannot handle it. We run away, we go into denial, we freeze, we go numb, or whatever it is. And so I would say it isn't that, again, denial would be wrong initially, but how long you stay in that cycle is key. Yeah. And I knew that. And I knew that because of the work I do. So I was very deliberate about requiring myself, or inviting myself, let's say, to be with what is, to really be with right here with what is, because I knew and I know that the more I can be here, on the ground I'm actually on, not in the thing I've lost, and not way out there in the future, like the thing I hope I'll get to, but right here, the better off I will be to know what my next step is. So the keys to working with resistance, the main key is basically, if you can notice it, like, for example, let's do something simple. Like, I know I need to go and work out I know I need an exercise regime. I've got to get in my body and do exercise. But every time I go, I make a plan, I try it for one day and I bail. So you just got to sort of help yourself, rather than say, oh, you're such a procrastinator, you just can never do it. You beat yourself up. Get some strategies in place. Like, you don't try to do it 7 days a week, for example, that thing. You commit to twice a week, and you have your running shoes by the coffee pot where you go to get your coffee first thing, which is like a strategy where you're linking exercise with the thing you already do. Mm-hmm. But you're doing this in a loving way, to recognize that there's some part of you that doesn't want to go into the body. And we don't know why, or, unless you're working with someone who can help you, like you or me, help you understand why you don't want to go there. Let's just go there gently. And so then, you go there. Okay, great. And then I did one day and I feel really good. Okay, I did one day. That's it. I only got one more day to do this week. And you give yourself those little wins.
Yeah. Set yourself up for success.
Mm-hmm.
That's so important to befriend that, befriend the resistance, befriend the process, and allow yourself the grace to figure out what works, and not say it should look like this 7 days a week. If I don't hit that mark, then something's wrong. It's like, well, maybe that's a future goal, and how can we meet ourselves where we're at and allow 2 days to be a success.
Absolutely. And to do it from, if I think we're just using this experience of, let's say, getting fit or weight loss. I work with women, and that often is an issue. And I have so many women who've been through the work I do that have tried every diet and done everything and had no success in any way, because the premise was, there's something wrong with me. I don't love my body. I don't want to be in this body, and I'm trying to whip it into shape, and I'm beating it up. Mm-hmm. And when they do the deeper work, and I do that, the first part of that work is around the feminine archetype of the mother archetype. So when you really cultivate your own inner mother, and you can be generous with yourself and loving to yourself, I mean, it is actually quite profound what happens when then they move toward wanting to take care. I want to take care of this body that I love, because I love I'm not, maybe I can't go right to I love myself right away, but I may have compassion for myself. I may be tender and kind to myself, and I realize I need to take care of myself by by doing this. And then it's a very different energy to go into the strategies I would call more masculine strategies. That's this blend of feminine and masculine that I work with.
Yeah, that is such a powerful shift.
Mm-hmm.
What might you say is a good way for recognizing those different energies of masculine and feminine? As you kind of mentioned earlier, and what I observe also is we often as women have come into masculine energy, especially in the job force and climbing career ladders and veering into that energy, maybe unconsciously. How do we recognize those differences? Because I think sometimes we get stuck in the extremes of like,
Absolutely.
Yeah, like wearing a dress is feminine versus wearing a suit that's masculine. And there's so many subtleties and nuances in between that we maybe don't realize that we're stuck in that masculine energy all the time. And how do we create that balance?
Yeah, totally. And that was actually the question that I was asking when I started the research, because I there was sort of the way people looked at the feminine was more, I would call mother archetype, was that all loving, mother, caring, compassionate. And the way people looked at the masculine, and me included at that early day, was just that part that could get stuff done and go out in the world and so on. But the first answer I'm going to give is that people should read my first book, The Way of the Mysterial Woman, Upgrading How You Live, Love, and Lead, because that is where we really discovered that there are these very important distinctions between aspects of what we call feminine and masculine. We have a developmental pathway that we kind of, I would say, dusted off, or like an archaeology. I don't know that we invented it. Maybe we downloaded it. Yeah. Better way to say it. That leads to, when a woman goes through this, that really leads to this next level of ourselves. We're trying to midwife in this dynamic evolutionary time. And it starts with the mother archetype. And the other end of that first polarity is the hero archetype. So this is what I call a vessel yin. So it's a static nature of yin, which is the mother, which is that ability to, yes, be caring for oneself, to really come home to the ground of our own being, to know you're enough, and arrive in the present moment. There's a deep piece of work. In our work, we work with all the shadows of these archetypal energies. That's the way that we get the unconscious conscious. And that would be one aspect of the feminine. And then the other end of that first polarity is, and it's important to see they move together, because often we try to just, let's say, heal our sense of I'm not enough, I'm broken, but we don't deal with the other end, which is the hero energy, which is dynamic masculine. And the limiting belief there is I have to do to be of value. Like my being is not enough. So if you don't deal with that, you're never going to get the release at the other end of the feminine. So there's that sort of fiery part of the hero that helps us penetrate the world and do the things we have to do and set boundaries and all of that. But then there's the next polarity starts with the father archetype, and it's a more static kind of masculine, which is about building the structures of your life and creating order and having a sovereign domain. It's very different, than just, it's just all masculine. You can't really get toward the shadow easily enough if you've just got this big glob of masculine. But once you know, okay, is my issue here that I can't set boundaries, and really when I commit to something, do it? Or is it that I don't want to show up fully in the world? The father archetype is about belonging and knowing that you're at home in your self and you naturally belong. And then the other end of that masculine is a fiery feminine, which we call the maiden. energy, and they go together. And this is that part, that sense of, I want the freedom to express myself. I want to break down all the structures, and the wild, we sometimes call the wild feminine. And this was really powerful in our research, because the moment we could see, no, everything is not globbed into this big mother energy. There's actually a really important dynamic feminine that often got a bad rap as being masculine, but actually it's the wild feminine, and we need that. And then the next level after that is the crone. And that's the final archetype in the sequence. It's actually at another octave almost. And then when that starts to come in, that's the weaving together of the feminine and the masculine. Like, we can actually bring them all together. Okay, so that was a relatively quick, 10 years of research and another book, just to give you a sense of the differentiations. And these were all of the tinctures that I used, that I knew, obviously, and I'd done the work in how I got through the very difficult challenges in my life that happened, and this particular one.
Wow. I've got to get that book. I can't wait to explore more about those archetypes and start to embody those. That sounds like such beautiful wisdom.
And their practices, I'll just let you know, Alyssa, we made that first book so that, because we had a limit of the number of women that could be in our depth programs. And when we knew we were onto something, we'd figured something out, we thought, let's get this so that anybody could start. Start here with the mother, and here's some practices to get started. Yeah.
I love that.
I'm curious, are any of the practices potentially aligned with the different phases of the feminine monthly cycle, or are they practices that you can really use anytime, anywhere, when you're wanting to embody certain aspects?
Yeah, no, anytime, anywhere. There really, what starts to happen once you get a sense of the sequence, because the point of the sequence is, as these are all of these archetypes, as I say, we didn't discover them. We didn't come up with fancy names for them. They were just primary archetypal energies. And an archetype, as you know, is like a magnetic pattern in our unconscious, around which the iron filings of our little ego align. And based on our family of origin and the dynamics when we were younger, we learned to put parts of ourselves away to get the love, safety, and belonging we needed, and to bring other parts of ourselves forward, which wasn't wrong. It was a beautiful thing. We call it the adaptive child. It was like, yeah, that was a smart thing to do. But of course, later in life, you want more access to more of yourself. That's what we should be happening. So it's very helpful to get precise about what part of me did I put away? And your life will usually direct you there in some way, because, like, let's say you notice the pattern is you just keep, maybe it's hard to step forward with your work in the world and really say, here I am. And you both have just done this with your podcast. And I'm sure it took something to get there, to say, we do have something to offer. We are going to do this, and we're going to step forward. That would be, to me, very father energy. But you have to work with, it's a sequence, that the way I see it. You get there because you've worked with, I am enough just as I am. You have your own healthy mother going. You have some healthy hero going. You are willing to do what needs to be done. And that's not everything, to know what's yours to do and then to do it. And, but if you were having a hard time doing that, you might say, oh, I think I got some father stuff I have to work through here. And then I would say, and we say this in the book, but still start at the beginning of the sequence. Like, make sure you've got healthy mother, healthy hero going. And then, your wound, your working is right up there at the father. But go downstream a bit first and make sure you've got that going.
Yeah, that reparenting aspect, coming in with that healthy mother first.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly. Yeah.
It definitely gets my wheels turning about different things that I find myself coming up against. I'm like, oh, okay, I need to go look at the sequence and give myself that starting point, because that's so powerful. So often I think we have awareness of what we want to change, and we see maybe even the origins of where a certain adaptable behavior came from, but where do we start? And so that's a beautiful framework to give us.
And this is that book. I do recommend that you get it if you're. I know everybody goes on to Kindle now, but it's actually a great book to highlight and put your little things in, because you will go back to it. There are, so I recommend that you consider doing that.
You're speaking my language. I am a in the hands, highlight,
Yes.
what do you call it? Dog ear, all of the things in my books. So
both books have I want to show you, because they're both really great in the hand. And they're the same artist. When we were getting ready to get this book out, the publishing firm that I went with, She Writes Press, which is a beautiful publishing house. I love them. But I didn't like what the cover they were offering. And so I asked a friend of mine who was a Mysterial, because in a way you needed to be a Mysterial, I think, to get the art. And She Writes Press was very open to that. So Linda Lowe is the name of the artist. And this first painting is this beautiful vessel that the black, this is because our work we do shadow work, very precise shadow work, but that's how you set the other birds free. And then this book has the same vessel, as it turns out. I mean, it's interesting. I didn't actually know it when I chose this painting, but it's this beautiful sense of the depth, what happens during a loss or a difficult challenge in your life. And this is the point of this book, is there is the possibility, that the real possibility, and even promise, that breaking down or breaking open can break you through to more of yourself and more of connection with others and more connection with the world. And the vessel, that's this image, is everything. In other words, the container you have for yourself becomes extremely important. And now we're back to what I was saying before about you have to be willing and ready and keep working toward coming into now, like into this as you make your path by walking. It isn't that you are walking to get somewhere. It isn't that if I just got to get through, survive this to get back to my life, to get somewhere. No, it's actually, this is my life right now. I won't get this moment back or this day back. This is exactly where I am. And it's as I'm able to be present in this moment with whatever's coming to me, that shapes where I end up going, which is a really important distinction between just surviving a trauma or a loss and letting it lead you somewhere you can't even imagine.
Yeah, that makes me think of times where I've experienced a trauma or loss in my younger years, where I would attempt to go back to life as usual, attempt to say, okay, maybe I dealt with it in my mind, and now I'm going to go back to the way things were, when in reality, the beauty of something like that becoming transformational is allowing it to actually transform the path that you're walking and the destination that you're headed towards.
Yeah, and that's a scary thing to do. I know that. I mean, because you have to be willing to really let go of what you had and where you were. You have to and this is the deepening potential, the potential to deepen trust and faith in something larger than the past and the rational mind. Like I used to say to myself, I still feel like I'm part of the friendly universe unfolding. And I was very aware and open to all the signs and signals, all the ways that I was getting supported in. And support is super important when you are going through a really difficult loss, as I write about. I had an amazing community around me, which I think is important, or even one good friend. You need the support, but trauma often isolates when we're going through trauma. Even just our own trauma from when we're younger, we don't want to deal with it, right? We want to isolate it. But most of our traumas come in the field of connection. And we're neurologically wired for connection. And the healing comes in connection. So being able to be open, and with suicide especially, there's a tendency for the shame of suicide to create this kind of isolating energy. And I was very deliberate with that, to stay in relationship with the people close to me and with the community I was in, and it was not my suicide. And this is actually not a book about suicide. It is a book about how I walked through the devastation after that suicide.
Yeah. A journey to allowing that deep wound of the loss to become the new fertile ground for the new, your new life and everything that was going to begin to happen after that loss. Do you want to expand more on that?
Yeah. Well, again, that's part of resting into what is. So that's it. Surrendering, the surrender to this is my life now. And that took something. That took a few days to just keep coming into this is actually happening to me. And I think when I speak about that sense that the loss is the fertile ground for the new, it is that your heart is broken open in a loss. It just is. Who for whom doesn't that happen unless you're so numb? And then that's like that's the fertile territory, right there of a heart that's cracked open. I remember in some ways I didn't even know I had a sort of plexiglass between myself and the world. Until it was shattered. And then I realized, wow, my ego has been keeping me separate from feeling really. And a transformational teacher. I work in this space, and this needed to break open in me. And I hadn't seen that there was a separation. So I could feel, I would see something poignant. It was so touching for me, someone else's suffering, my own suffering. I was able to be with my own suffering, and with the suffering of others in a way I'd never been able to really be before. Yeah. So I think that is the Joseph Campbell and other people who sort of created the maps of transformation, the hero's journey, the heroine's journey, the descent, the initiation, and then the return. They would call that initiation time the finding the gold in the wound. Mm. But you have to be willing to be there and not just trying to get out all the time. And so that's where the surrender is happening. It's like, no, this is really my life right now. And for me, I was sure I mean, I lost everything in a very short period of time, within 6 months, really. Everything in my outer life, the way I knew it was gone. And I knew I certainly never wanted another experience like that. And I wanted to be able to be as present as I could be for whatever I could grow in myself and cultivate in myself in the darkness.
Mm. Wow, honoring your journey and all the work that you went through this last decade. Thank you so much for this book and for putting your story out there, this wisdom and the tools.
Thank you. Yeah. It was quite it was, first of all, the lived journey. I didn't know I would write this book. First of all, I had to complete and put out my first book. That came out 3 years later. And then it took several years after that to feel I needed to actually just write. For me, I needed to write myself back together, and I would go away on retreat and just write, go back to the me that went through the incredible difficulty of that year, and just write myself together, as I say. And then I showed it to my editor from the first book, and I said, is this something you think could be of use? And Gail was very much, yes, I think you need to write a book. I think this needs to become a book. You have something to offer. And so then that was about 2 years ago now. I said, okay, put it into this, and here it is, just came out a couple of weeks ago. So I'm really happy I did do this, and that I'm now speaking about it is very powerful. Yeah.
I feel like books like that are just such a courageous expression of the healing journey that you have gone on, and really speaks to people's hearts in a different way than someone who is perhaps coming across the same information in research and putting that research into a resource for someone, which is still extremely valuable. But when it is birthed through an experience like yours, I can feel it in my heart, and I haven't even read it yet. So that just speaks to the power right there.
Well, thank you, because I think that's exactly, the first book is case studies of students. So it tells that story, but it is not my story. And I wasn't ready to tell it when this book came out. And I have heard from people that I've worked with for a long time or been in my programs that it's been very powerful for them to really know more of my story, of my own personal journey. And really, you make your path by walking, that I can stand really strongly on the ground of let's say, this inner operating system that I have installed. And it got deeply embodied over these 10 years. And the invitation, I would just come back around to as we close here, just to say the invitation is, if life has given you something, either an inside urge you got to, something is trying to change, or an outside knock coming, maybe unwanted, that fire can be incredibly potent. So this book, You Make Your Path by Walking, is designed to help you, men and women, through this fire in a way that is transformational. Yeah. Alchemical, I could say.
Yeah, that's a wonderful invitation. And where can our listeners find your work, your books, your programs, retreats.
Mm-hmm.
Give us all the deets.
Yeah. Mysterialwoman.com. So it's MYSTERIAL woman.com is the website. And you'll find everything there. We will be launching a new program in the fall that will be a little intro program based on You Make Your Path by Walking. And then our deeper work for women who are ready to do the real serious inner upgrade, that'll be in 2024, that program. But in the meantime, books are on Amazon, and go to your local bookstore and have them order it. I would love more of us to do that. I love those local bookstores. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Beautiful. We are so honored to have you on today. Thank you for your time and your wisdom.
Thank you. Great to be with you both.
So letting our listeners know that we hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, and thank you so much for watching.